Greetings, I'm Coach Barbara Belón, and I'll be taking you through this journey on how to enrich your conversations. My own investment in becoming a professional coach has led to opportunities to participate in research that is studying the effects of giving college students and college faculty a subset of the basic skills in coaching. The two main skills are active listening and the art and science of asking powerful questions. With this minimal set, you will be able to enhance your communication skills in everyday conversations. We're going to start by talking about listening. You may be surprised to learn that listening involves not just your ears, but all your senses. It also involves listening for what was not said and sensing your conversation partner's emotions. But first, please take out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. I'd like you to write down what is on your mind right now that might get in the way of capturing the information of this session. No one will see this but you, and when you're finished, turn it face down and push it to the far edge of wherever you are sitting. After this session, you can pick up that topic or that problem and give it the time that it deserves. But for now, go ahead and rate how engaged you plan to be during this time together. Now, for those of you that think your engagement won't be higher than a 3 or less, my question to you is, what would it take to move that ranking to a 4 or 5? You have the answer for that. But the higher your engagement, the more you'll get out of this investment in your time. So the topic of listening. We've all known someone that we would rate as a good listener. For you, think about who it is. Who is that person in your life that was the absolute best listener? What was it about them that made them such a good listener? Once you know more about listening, you will be able to identify those characteristics that made them a good listener. Now, when it comes to developing listening skills, there are several objectives. Professional, executive, and life coaches are trained to listen and respond to others. Unfortunately, our culture treats many of our opportunities for meaningful conversations as just throwaways. We just don't take the time to listen deeply. Why did she ask that question? Why did he direct it at me? What is going on at a deeper level? Now, here's a bit of information about how your brain works. When asked a memory retrieval question, humans are more likely to remember something based on how much attention it was given and how engaged they were at the time it was stored in their brains. From a brain storage issue, input from all our senses, the auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and olfactory, it all gets stored with your memories too, all contributing to how memorable something may be. Now, the point is that every conversation makes an impact somewhere along that continuum from trivial to never forget this. The question to you as the listener is how engaged you will be. You are in control of that. But know this, your listening and subsequent questions will make an impact on your conversation partners, whether that be your spouse, a child, colleague, client, friend, or a stranger. So let's take a look at how active listening is different from casual listening. At this point, one question you might be asking is, well, what can I do to improve my listening? First and foremost, an active listener is totally focused on the conversation partner. Everything else is excluded or muted so that you can focus on what the person said. If you started the conversation and are trying to pass on knowledge, then you also have to evaluate whether or not your conversation partner actually captured that understanding. When someone else initiates the conversation, you, the listener, not only register their spoken words, but also you can look at the value of the information you just heard and how that information relates to the topic under discussion. So in conversations, we ask questions because we need to evaluate or validate what our conversation partners have told us. But what about your everyday conversations? How much do you use your listening and question crafting in all your conversations? Well, you are the only one that can answer those questions. But for starters, let's look at the actual encoding process that the brain uses. While this series spends a good chunk of time exploring how to ask powerful questions, we're actually going to start with how the brain encodes, stores, and retrieves information. That doesn't sound real sexy, but it is vitally important in any conversation. This sequence of brain actions underpins all learning and is also linked to the health of relationships. So think about conversations. In any conversation, there is what I call the initiator, and there is the partner. And I'll use those terms throughout this presentation. When it comes to conversations, the brains of both parties are actively encoding the data and storing it somewhere in the cerebral cortex, which is then available for retrieval at a future date. The important point is that both parties in a conversation can assist in both the encoding, storage, and retrieval steps. There was a recent research in neuroscience that shows that if information is paired with a strong or pleasurable stimulus, the encoding, storage, and then retrieval sequence is stronger and longer lasting than in what I could call unassisted learning. For instance, I had a colleague of mine who was experimenting with using music in her history lesson on the US Civil War. In one class, she showed time-sequenced photos of the early war years and paired it with happy, confident tunes of the mid-1800s. But as the war years unfolded and the pictures of the actual battles and the hardships on both sides were shown, she changed the music to more somber tunes. The outcome? Her students who saw this presentation were enormously engaged and were able to later answer questions on the battles and their significance in greater details, as compared to a class which did not see her graphic presentation. The point? Facts paired with sounds, graphics, smells, or tactile sensory information will be remembered longer than facts alone. More so if the information is personally relevant. So this research of the effects of pairing multiple sensory stimuli with any fact retrieving questions increases the probability of your conversation partners having stronger recall of what was discussed. Here's your first challenge. Listen to the following short recorded message Then I have some questions for you. Pause this recording and replay the audio clip if necessary.
Hey, Jamie, it's Carol. I am really getting concerned about our dad. He never even called me on my birthday. Do you think we ought to be worried about his mental health? We need to talk. Give me a call.
So what did you hear? Pause this video and jot down your answers to the questions on this slide. Okay, let's see how you did. Who was the caller? If your answer is Carol, you are correct. Who did Carol call? She called Jamie, the sister. So what was one of the issues? Well, if you got that their father did not call Carol on her birthday, then you have that one correct as well. But what was the other issue? The what else? If you heard Carol's concern for her father's mental health, yes, then you got that right as well. For the last question, question number 5, your answers may vary, but you probably picked up that Carol was concerned enough to demand that Jamie give her a call. So let me pose the question. What if this was one of your family members and you had picked up the phone? What would you ask first? The good thing about recorded calls is that you can replay them and have time to plan your response. If your sister or brother came over to your house and launched these questions at you, then you would not have time to replay it and would be expected to respond immediately. With your conversation partners, you are expected to respond immediately, which is why we all need to be totally focused on what is being said. You will never know when someone drops a question on you for which they are internally pleading for a response. Neither their face nor their tone of voice might show it, but your response may be all that is keeping them from a major meltdown. Now that's extreme, but I'm trying to make the point that all conversations, even seemingly frivolous ones, may have unseen layers that are serious. Here's your next challenge. Listen to the following short conversation, and then I'll have questions for you. Pause the video and replay the audio if you need to.
So what are some things you could do to feel more comfortable with the new members of your team?
I could schedule time for one-on-one informal chats.
Good idea. What else?
I have some funds in my budget for team building, so I could take them to dinner or bowling or something.
All possibilities. What else?
Oh, I was just thinking about what I like to do, but remember, I mentioned that they both have some physical handicaps. I probably need to think about something less physical that they might enjoy.
Good thought. What else might you do?
I could make it a bit less formal and invite them to join me for a cup of coffee in the building's cafe.
So you've talked about places for the meeting. What do you want to accomplish?
I want them to get to know me, and I want them to feel comfortable joining the team. But with the conversations, I can also find out more about them.
Sounds reasonable. When could you schedule the one-on-one sessions?
Let me get my calendar. Tuesday, I have 2 30-minute blocks open. I can schedule it then, either jointly or 2 one-on-one chats.
Great. Sounds like a plan. So, at the end of the chats with your new team members, what would success look like?
So how was your listening this time? Go ahead and pause the video and write down your answers to the questions on this slide. If you need to listen to the recording again, please do so. but note what you heard differently the second time you listened. Now let's take a look at your answers. If you said one of the conversation partners was a manager, that's great. The other person is not described and could be another manager, a boss, or a coach. For question number 2, regarding the reason for this conversation, the manager mentioned wanting to get more comfortable with his new team members. But when prompted with what else, he clearly started focusing on what his team members might want. The last question on tone of voice or emotion can be difficult to pick up. However, this manager sounded more confident of his decisions at the end of the conversation. So here's another thought question for you. If you had been the coach or the boss in this conversation, what might you have asked differently? The point is that there are no right answers, but the effort you put into posing thought-provoking questions in any conversation will pay big dividends. Now, let's consider the aspects of listening and observing and how they help us understand what we're hearing. Clearly, we use ears and eyes to gather information. In fruitful conversations, the process should not include judging or deciding whether what you heard is true or false, complete or incomplete. Judgments get in the way of honest and open conversations. Now, when we're talking about clarifications or summarizing, you can do this in your conversations. In your listening, this gives you a chance to ensure that you understood what your conversation partner was trying to say. Summarizing also shows that you care enough to verify. Now, some examples would be, I think I heard you say, and then repeat their first point, their second point. Did I get that right? What might I have missed? Under observations of your conversation partner can add another layer of meaning to what you have heard. When you asked a question, did they start to squirm or change their posture? You can also take note of any emotional changes or facial changes that are made. Did they gasp? Did they raise their eyebrows? Did they smile or laugh inappropriately? So the observations of body signals add nonverbal information about your conversation partner and how they're reacting. And a comment on silence. The length of silence between the conversation partner's statement and your next question not only gives you time to prepare your question, but also gives the partner time to think about what they just said. Many times, if they are given the opportunity in silence, they will enhance or amend what they said. If you jump in with your next question, that does not give them any time to reflect. It also allows you to think about what they did not say that can also be explored. The point is that both your ears and your eyes are involved in listening and providing nonverbal input to the conversation. So we've covered ways that you can increase your listening skills. But here is something that can get in the way: our inner voice. We all have one. For example, your inner voice can force itself to the front of your mind, bringing up things that are not relevant to the conversation. like your shopping list or a chore that needs to be done. That voice needs to be quieted. The inner critic is just that, critical of either the conversation partner or you and your behavior. So while the inner voice can interrupt your conversation by moving your attention from the partner to you, the inner critic is always abusive and disruptive to someone. So being able to recognize and then control your inner critic is necessary in all conversations. So what would you identify as an example of your inner critic? Mine has been with me most of my entire adult life, and it's the voice that says, that was stupid, Barbara, and can happen even with something as simple as forgetting when I'm walking upstairs without the object that I intentionally went down to find. So let's summarize what you've heard in this video on listening skills. If you want to increase your listening skills, you need to be totally focused on your conversation partner. You summarize what you think you heard, but you listen without judging or sounding critical or giving unsolicited advice. As you are listening, you are also observing your partner's emotions, movements, gestures, and other nonverbal cues that are present. And finally, you need to be aware of your inner voice and critic and keep them under control. So here are your last two challenges. Over the next few days, watch a TV news show of your choice and pay attention to any recorded interview clips. Notice whether or not the interviewers seem to be listening to the person being interviewed or just pushed on with their own agenda of questions. Next, write down one or two aspects of listening that you want to particularly pay attention to in your conversations. For me, I'd love to know what you found the most intriguing or the most useful in this video. You can email me at bjbelón@gmail.com and I'll be happy to recommend other available resources on listening skills. If you would like to participate in a live seminar which goes into more depth on both listening and questioning and includes practice with actual live conversations, then contact Executive Director Corey Newman at the address listed on this slide or visit the ELEA website listed above. Thanks for watching.